Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Reading Epic Threads. I'm your host, Patrick Gunnels, joining you from Spring, Texas, this September 16th, 2024 at 6:49 a.m. Central Daylight Time. From Rootbitch, I bring to you some epic threads and then a full piece. We're going to start with The Consultant, Civilian 1A on Twitter. How 20,000 Haitians stormed Ohio to take jobs that were never advertised. Receipts at end of thread. The Haitian invasion of Ohio has created a lot of buzz. There are a lot of unexplained aspects of it that people find odd. One of these strange happenings is that locals reported that the jobs the Haitians came for were never advertised to the local population. So, how did Haitians find out about them? It turns out that a network of federal grant recipient organizations have quietly seized control of nearly the entire job market in the U.S. and work to ensure that openings remain hidden so that refugees can take them ahead of American citizens. How many job openings remain hidden? The internal estimates of this network put the number of hidden openings at 80% of all available jobs. 80%. The way that this network has seized control of the labor market of the United States is easy enough to understand. First, it has positioned itself as a way to remove recruiting costs for employers. Next, it offers employers laborers who can work for lower wages by also providing its refugees with a plethora of social welfare not available to a typical American worker. Finally, it can provide access to the entire global labor market by setting the conditions of refugee status to effectively cover anyone in the world. If an employer needs nurses, janitors, programmers, police, or literally any kind of worker, the network can provide them to employers at a lower rate of pay than what an American citizen would require due to not having access to the same welfare benefits. These globally sourced scab workers don't require health insurance and have all living expenses subsidized by federal programs. If the typical American had all their health, food, and housing costs covered, they would also be able to work for a fraction of their existing wages. Instead, they cover the cost of these global laborers by paying much, much more for food, housing, and healthcare. Is this sustainable? If the trend of authoritarian communism continues to win, yes. If 80% of work opportunities are already exclusive to connected networks, most of the public will soon have no choice but to work directly for government. The military recruiting crisis will be resolved by simply continuing to deny access to employment and driving up the cost of living for citizens. That's from The Consultant. Next, from Civilian 1A on Twitter, International Rescue Committee details its plan to capture 150 million refugees to seize control of government. Strategy 100. In a previous post, I detailed a report from an organization called Switchboard that works on behalf of a refugee network, refugee in quotes, to capture as many American jobs and social welfare benefits as possible. The International Rescue Committee is another node in this network, and it has released a report detailing a strategy to achieve power through its control of the global refugee population. The plan is simple. Use refugees under the control of the IRC to manipulate democratic processes under the guise of altruism. What does this look like in practice? The IRC-backed Haitian invasion of Springfield, Ohio is one example of how the organization can successfully alter political outcomes in local, state, and national elections. Importing 20,000 IRC clients into Ohio, a critical swing state, has the potential to affect the outcome of all presidential elections, not to mention the ramifications on the local and state level. With direct connections to the State Department, the IRC can not only take advantage of refugees born out of organic crisis situations, but also create refugees through foreign policy decisions. The fact that the IRC now makes use of both Afghan and Ukrainian refugees to pursue power suggests that humanitarian disasters are of great benefit to the organization. Democracy can be hacked. This has been proven over and over. An organization with a board linked to BlackRock, Pfizer, and McKinsey has found a way to hack democracy by taking control of millions of people's lives and well-being and strategically using them to subvert democratic processes. The IRC uses rhetoric designed to paint itself as a savior, working to empower refugees, but the indisputable truth is that it works to empower a network of oligarchs through controlling refugees. Refugees have no say in the goals of the IRC. They have no control over where the IRC sends them. The IRC and its associates in government that have laundered billions to the organization are plainly taking part in a human trafficking scheme they've set up for personal benefit. And finally, one more thread from the consultants at Civilian1A on Twitter. Who owns the Haitians? The so-called Haitian invasion of Ohio has brought up many questions, but one that keeps coming up more than any other is, how did they get there? While liberals are desperately trying to pretend the Haitians flew north for the summer like the Springfield City Park geese they are now famous for poaching, the truth is that they live at the mercy of private corporations. Perhaps the most powerful private corporation in the business of refugees is called the International Rescue Committee. It probably seems odd that private corporations have essentially been given control of vast numbers of helpless people. But it is true, the U.S. government has basically handed over control of the immigration system to private contractors. For example, according to the IRC's 2021 Form 990, the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration made $177,966,003 in total contributions to the organization to do the work the BPRM is presumably supposed to do itself. That same year, the Department of Health and Human Services made $122,817,860 in total contributions. This was in addition to several European governmental bodies making enormous contributions. The IRC totaled a whopping $728,302,816 in governmental contributions that year and raised $1.35 billion overall. Refugees have become a multi-billion-dollar private industry. Unsurprisingly, the trafficking of human beings through these organizations has exploded out of control, and the services this industry is providing seem to have shifted from humanitarian aid to strategic political warfare services via increasingly unethical resettlement campaigns. The IRC itself embraces the idea of expansion and power building, as evidenced in its controversial Strategy 100 report. It goes without saying that the organization frames its mission to be in service of the refugees under its care. However, the goals that the organization pursues are ultimately its own. The vast numbers of refugees that it holds power over via its resource distribution decisions are not given a vote on any organizational matter. The IRC is not a democracy. It is a private corporation with an infamous board of directors. It comes as no surprise that the board of a leader in the private multi-billion-dollar refugee industry is connected to BlackRock. The name Lawrence D. Fink immediately catches the eye when scanning the organization's boards of directors and advisors, and there are other well-known names such as Timothy F. Geithner and Condoleezza Rice. But even more alarming are the institutions associated with the individuals on the boards, such as Morgan Stanley, Pfizer, Blackstone, McKinsey & Company, PepsiCo, Bank of America, many of America's most prestigious universities, and more. It's as if the global elite co-own the privately operated and publicly funded refugee industry, an industry that has recently spawned the most horrific human trafficking pipeline since the transatlantic slave trade. Notably, Secretary of State Antony Blinken has publicly acknowledged the disaster taking place through private industry's willingness to work with and around criminal cartels to traffic people into the U.S., calling it, quote, the incredibly hazardous journey toward our border. In the same speech, however, he made no mention of the private corporations facilitating the operations and spoke as though it were a solely governmental. His stepmother, Vera Blinken, sits on the board of advisors for the IRC. The Blinken connection to the IRC, an organization that inherently builds its power and funding through refugees, highlights the disastrous incentives at work in this revolving door industry. Secretary of State Blinken has overseen an Afghan refugee crisis and a Ukrainian refugee crisis, to state the obvious. Allowing a private refugee industry with deep governmental connections to exist creates incentive for governments to help generate refugees. The actions of the Biden administration have made this problem excruciatingly clear, and trust in private resettlement organizations has been irreparably broken. But refugees do exist and require legitimate aid. The solution to problems seems fairly straightforward, since this private industry is overwhelmingly funded by the public. Have government perform the duties of government. Oversight, regulation, and transparency are required for this issue. The NGOs must go. Check him out on Twitter, and thanks to Rootbitch for bringing it to my attention. And don't forget, the Twitter handle is @civilian1a. And now, without further ado, I bring to you from Rootbitch the income tax. Sixteenth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, Federal Income Tax, 1913, passed by Congress on July 2nd, 1909, ratified February 3rd, 1913. The 16th Amendment established Congress's right to impose a federal income tax, far-reaching in its social as well as its economic impact. The Income Tax Amendment became part of the Constitution by a curious series of events, culminating in a bit of political maneuvering that went awry. The financial requirements of the Civil War prompted the first American income tax in 1861. At first, Congress placed a flat 3% tax on all incomes over $800 and later modified this principle to include a graduated tax. Congress repealed the income tax in 1872, but the concept did not disappear. After the Civil War, the growing industrial and financial markets of the eastern United States generally prospered. But the farmers of the South and West suffered from low prices for their farm products, while they were forced to pay high prices for manufactured goods. Throughout the 1860s, 1870s, and 1880s, farmers formed such political organizations as the Grange, the Greenback Party, the National Farmers Alliance, and the People's Populist Party. All of these groups advocated many reforms, see the Interstate Commerce Act, considered radical for the times, including a graduated income tax. In 1894, as part of a high tariff bill, Congress enacted a 2% tax on income over $4,000. The tax was almost immediately struck down by a 5-4 decision of the Supreme Court, even though the court had upheld the constitutionality of the Civil War tax as recently as 1881. Although farm organizations denounced the court's decision as a prime example of the alliance of government and business against the farmer, a general return of prosperity around the turn of the century softened the demand for reform. Democratic Party platforms under the leadership of three-time presidential candidate William Jennings Bryan, however, consistently included an income tax plank, and the progressive wing of the Republican Party also espoused the concept. In 1909, progressives in Congress again attached a provision for an income tax to a tariff bill. Conservatives, hoping to kill the idea for good, proposed a constitutional amendment enacting such a tax. They believed an amendment would never receive ratification by 3/4 of the states. Much to their surprise, the amendment was ratified by one state legislature after another, and on February 25th, 1913, With the certification by Secretary of State Philander C. Knox, the 16th Amendment took effect. Yet, in 1913, due to generous exemptions and deductions, less than 1% of the population paid income taxes at the rate of only 1% of net income. This document settled the constitutional question of how to tax income and, by so doing, effected dramatic changes in the American way of life. From constitution.congress.gov, 16th Amendment. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived, without apportionment among the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration. From congress.gov, from the 118th Congress, proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States to repeal the 16th Article of Amendment. In the House of Representatives, March 30th, 2023, Mr. Davidson for himself, Mrs. Miller of Illinois, Mr. Norman, Mr. Jackson of Texas, and Mr. Perry submitted the following joint resolution, which was referred to the Committee on the Judiciary. Joint resolution proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States to repeal the 16th Article of Amendment. Resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled 2/3 of each house, concurring therein, Section 1, that the following article is proposed as an amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of the Constitution when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states within 7 years after the date of its submission for ratification. Article, effective 2 years after the ratification of this Article of Amendment, the 16th Article of Amendment to the Constitution of the United States is repealed, and the Congress shall have no power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived, except in time of war declared by the Congress. Section 2. Not later than 180 days after the ratification of the Article of Amendment in Section 1, the Secretary of the Treasury shall submit a report to Congress containing recommendations for any legislation that may be necessary to implement such article.
Our tax cuts are coming due, as you know, very soon. And if the Democrats don't renew them or make it impossible to renew because it's pretty close in terms of vote, if they don't renew them, it's the equivalent of having a 4 times tax increase from what you have right now, and it'll destroy the economy. I think they're under tremendous pressure to do it. I've never seen, all my life I grow up and I watch politics, and I used to be on the other side of politics first, and then I run for office. But in all the years of studying politics, I've never seen people get elected by saying, we're going to give you a tax increase. These guys get up, think of it. We're going to give you no security. We're going to give you a weak military. We're going to give you no walls, no borders, no anything. We're going to, all these things they're doing. I mean, the transgender became such a big thing, but they do all of these things, but they always say, we're going to give you a tax increase. I never heard anybody campaign on a tax increase. A politician has always said, I will cut taxes. I'll give you one example, Social Security. They're going to destroy Social Security. I am going to leave Social Security. I'm not raising the years. I'm not raising the age. I will be saving Social Security, and I'm going to work it out that there's no tax on Social Security for seniors. I'm also doing no tax on tips, no tax on tips. So waiters, waitresses, caddies, people that drive cars, people that get tips who have been harassed by this government, we're going to have no tax on tips. That's a big thing.
Harris copies Trump's promise on no tax for tips. Vice President Kamala Harris in Nevada on Saturday promised to eliminate taxes on tips 2 months after former President Trump promised to do the same. Why it matters. Their rare point of agreement underscores the bipartisan popularity of the novel piece of economic policy. Quote, it is my promise to everyone here when I am president, we will continue to fight for working families, including to raise the minimum wage and eliminate taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers, Harris told a crowd of 12,000 people in University of Nevada in Las Vegas on Saturday. This was a Trump idea. She has no ideas. She can only steal from me, Trump wrote on Truth Social, accusing Harris of taking the position for, quote, political purposes. Zoom in. Harris was endorsed by Nevada's powerful Culinary Union on Saturday, which represents 60,000 hospitality workers. Back in June, also in Las Vegas, Trump embraced the idea of no tax on tips after a Nevada waitress who served his table conveyed to Trump that she felt the government was taking too much of the money she earns as tips by taxing her. They come in and they take so much of our money, it's just ridiculous, the waitress told Trump. Trump recalled at the RNC in Milwaukee. How it happened. After Trump first introduced the idea at rally in early June, Republican Party adopted the policy proposal as a part of the Republican National Committee's 2024 platform. Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, introduced a bill exempting tips from federal income tax that received support from both of Nevada's Democratic Senators Jackie Rosen and Catherine Cortez Masto. We will pass it as soon as we can, said House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana. Soon, other Democratic lawmakers started voicing their support. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. He may be right about this one, said Representative Richie Torres, Democrat of New York, about Trump's idea.
Go ahead, one more. Make it a good one, please.
Okay, regarding Social Security taxes for seniors,
Right.
which we've talked about a while, experts say that the policy could increase the deficit by 1.6 trillion. So how would it work in your view?
We have so many ways of making money in this country. We're not going to affect our Social Security. We're not changing it. And I proved that over 4 years. And we're going to do it. It's very unfair to people. They spend their life and they're great citizens and they pay in. We're not going to charge tax to Social Security, the seniors. We're not going to do it. We're not going to charge. And also tax. I say the two things. We're going to have no tax on seniors, Social Security, and we're going to have no tax on tips. Very simple. And we are a country that has so many different ways to make money. We have under our feet more liquid gold, I call it oil and gas, than any country in the world, much more than Saudi Arabia, much more than Russia. We have so many different ways we can make money. We're not going to hurt our seniors with Social Security, and we're not going to charge them tax. Okay?
Can I squeeze one in on this real?
Television. That's what he said. Right. Now, with all of that, of course, you have to look at corruption. Are we going to be sending massive amounts of money to a country and they're corrupt and they steal the money and it goes into everybody's bank account? So you have to look at that. And I will tell you this about Joe Biden. I never said it specifically on him, but I watched Joe Biden with the prosecutor, who a lot of people said was a great prosecutor, and they took him off. And he was prosecuting that company. And the kid who never made 10 cents in his life and all of a sudden is making millions of dollars the day he, I mean, you tell me, this is a guy who got thrown out of the Navy dishonorably. He gets thrown out of the Navy shortly thereafter and made no money. Went through, made no money.
But Mr. President,
then all of a sudden his father becomes VP and he's making millions and millions of dollars, not only from there, but from China.
So, Mr. President, the accusation is this, that you're using...
Q drop, number 1,953. Are we going to be sending massive amounts of money that simply goes into other people's personal bank accounts? Theft. POTUS. Who audits where foreign aid actually goes? Nobody. Foreign aid goes to country X, goes to personal bank accounts, U.S. persons involved. Think Iran, think Paris Accord attempt, think all corrupt system. Do you think GS is spending his own money, re-push of radical viewpoint adoption? U.S. taxpayer payments, aid goes directly and indirectly to GS organizations, drops, foreign aid. Listen carefully.
Our movement is about replacing a failed and corrupt political establishment with a new government controlled by you, the American people. The Washington establishment and the financial and media corporations that fund it exist for only one reason: to protect and enrich itself. The establishment has trillions of dollars at stake in this election. For those who control the levers of power in Washington and for the global special interest, they partner with these people that don't have your good in mind. Our campaign represents a true existential threat. like they haven't seen before. This is not simply another 4-year election. This is a crossroads in the history of our civilization that will determine whether or not we, the people, reclaim control over our government. The political establishment that is trying to stop us is the same group responsible for our disastrous trade deals, massive illegal immigration, and economic and foreign policies that have bled our country dry. The political establishment has brought about the destruction of our factories and our jobs as they flee to Mexico, China, and other countries all around the world. It's a global power structure that is responsible for the economic decisions that have robbed our working class, stripped our country of its wealth, and put that money into the pockets of a handful of large corporations and political entities. This is a struggle for the survival of our nation, and this will be our last chance to save it. This election will determine whether we're a free nation or whether we have only the illusion of democracy, but are in fact controlled by a small handful of global special interests rigging the system, and our system is rigged. This is reality. You know it, they know it, I know it, and pretty much the whole world knows it. The Clinton machine is at the center of this power structure. We've seen this firsthand in the WikiLeaks documents, in which Hillary Clinton meets in secret with international banks to plot the destruction of U.S. sovereignty in order to enrich these global financial powers, her special interest friends, and her donors. Honestly, she should be locked up. The most powerful weapon deployed by the Clintons is the corporate media, the press. Let's be clear on one thing. The corporate media in our country is no longer involved in journalism. They're a political special interest, no different than any lobbyist or other financial entity with a total political agenda, and the agenda is not for you, it's for themselves. Anyone who challenges their control is deemed a sexist, a racist, a xenophobe. They will lie, and then again, they will do worse than that. They will do whatever is necessary. The Clintons are criminals, remember that. This is well documented, and the establishment that protects them has engaged in a massive cover-up of widespread criminal activity at the State Department and the Clinton Foundation in order to keep the Clintons in power. They knew they would throw every lie they could at me and my family and my loved ones. They knew they would stop at nothing to try to stop me. Nevertheless, I take all of these slings and arrows gladly for you. I take them for our movement so that we can have our country back. I knew this day would arrive. It's only a question of when. And I knew the American people would rise above it and vote for the future they deserve. The only thing that can stop this corrupt machine is you. The only force strong enough to save our country is us. The only people brave enough to vote out this corrupt establishment is you, the American people. Our great civilization has come upon a moment of reckoning. I didn't need to do this, folks, believe me. I built a great company, and I had a wonderful life. I could have enjoyed the fruits and benefits of years of successful business deals and businesses for myself and my family, instead of going through this absolute horror show of lies, deceptions, malicious attacks. Who would have thought? I'm doing it because this country has given me so much, and I feel so strongly that it's my turn to give back to the country that I love. I'm doing this for the people and for the movement, and we will take back this country for you, and we will make America great again.
Returning power to the people. draining the swamp. POTUS is fighting for you. It's been a long time since we've had a non-corrupt POTUS who cares for the people and not himself. Q.
Today, I'm also announcing that as part of our additional tax cuts, we will end all taxes on overtime. You know what that means? Think of that. Think of that. Think of that. That gives people more of an incentive to work. It gives the companies it's a lot easier to get the people. And, you know, I went to some economists, great ones, and I said, what do you think? They said, it would be unbelievable. You'll get a whole new workforce by doing that. No taxes on overtime. The people who work overtime are among the hardest working citizens in our country. And for too long, no one in Washington has been looking out for them. Those are the people that really work. They're police officers, nurses, factory workers, construction workers, truck drivers, and machine operators. It's time for the working man and woman to finally catch a break, and that's what we're doing because this is a good one. And I think it's going to be great for the country. So that's why we will be saying that if you're an overtime worker, when you're past 40 hours a week, think of that. Your overtime hours will be tax-free. Okay, good. You're going to have it too. And unlike Biden, where he tells you that you don't have to pay your school tuition and he gets rejected, then he goes again and again. Now it's totally gone. Or as they say in politics, it's debunked. It's gone. That was terrible. You know, he kept saying to these students, no more loans, no more loans, which was very unfair to the millions of people that actually paid off their loans over the years. Some of them took 20 years to pay them off, but that's a dead deal. That's totally dead. You know, they tried to revive it 2 weeks ago. That didn't work out too well. That's a totally dead deal. But these will be 3 things that will get done. So if you think about no tax on tips, think of that. Think about this and the Social Security for our seniors, because the seniors have been destroyed by inflation. It's unfair. And this is like a whole new life for them because you're talking about a lot of money. So no tax on Social Securities for our great seniors. And this last one is no tax. You work your ass off, no tax on overtime. And that's so good for the employers. One of our economists said, I think that's actually going to bring money into our economy. You know, when I cut taxes, we had the largest tax cut in history. And when I cut taxes with a much lower rate the following year, we took in more money than we ever took in with a much higher rate. People, the jobs, people work by a lot.
And that is our show today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to go to epicminerals.net and get the clean, hippie, epic moisture, creamy body butter, lime, and patchouli essential oils. We got 50 left. So get them now. Use promo code Shapiro for 10% off. Let us pray. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all evil spirits who prowl about the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. I love you all. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you tomorrow.